When we hear the word argument, we often think about the quarrels that we have with those that we live with. So, fighting over who gets to use the Xbox with our sibling, or fighting with a parent over who has to clean the bathroom. These really aren't arguments as much as they are quarrels. When we use the word argument in an academic setting, what we're really talking about is debate over essential issues and problems. So if you think, for instance, about the current public discourse in our nation, we've been fighting over a definition of what marriage is. Is it between a man and a woman, or is it just between two consenting adults? This is a definition argument that pertains to everyone as it determines public policy. The reason that argument is actually a benefit to us is it is a way, as I said, to help us solve problems and to hear conflicting solutions offered often. And so argumentation actually works to help us improve our lives. And so when we argue with someone, we want to recognize that we are entering into a conversation. We want to explain our point of view, backing that point of view with good, solid evidence in order to convince and persuade our readers that we are in fact correct. So when we hear the word rhetoric, we should understand that we are talking about the art of persuasion. And part of this class is to learn how to argue ethically. So in order to understand what arguing is, we really have to be able to analyze and read arguments, which is why our first assignment is a rhetorical analysis. And so we're really talking about how to break down and understand someone else's argument in this first essay so that we can then turn around and construct our own in the second half of the course. So we might begin by thinking about the different types of arguments. I mentioned earlier the marriage debate that we are having. This is a definition argument. The reading, I am a Memphian, is really a definition argument. What does it mean to be a Memphian, and what is Memphis? We also see evaluation arguments. This is when I might argue that the iPhone is better than the Android phone, and I'm going to use a list of criteria, comparing and contrasting my criteria to prove that I am in fact correct. Another type of argument is the causal argument. What is the cause of the current problem? So if we think about global warming, no credible scientist on the planet argues that global warming is not occurring. However, there are arguments and legitimate arguments about why or what is the cause of global warming. Are human beings, in fact, the problem or not? The latest research that I've seen does seem to prove that we are. The other type of argument we often see is what is the best solution for a current problem? So I haven't seen a whole lot of solutions about global warming. However, you might think about crime in Memphis. There are a number of people proposing different solutions. More police, more opportunities for young people, more opportunities for entertainment for young people. And so one of the first things that we want to think about when we approach an argument is, can we categorize what the author is attempting to do by the genre of the argument? Whenever we begin either reading or constructing an essay, we automatically should think of the rhetorical triangle. So the rhetorical triangle helps us as writers, ethos, begin from an ethical position to convince our audience, pathos, using our text, the logos. And so each of these represent a triangle to make meaning. We, the writer, again, ethos, are attempting to persuade an audience, pathos, through our text, logos. Argument is really the basis of all education, and the Greeks determined the basic structure for argument thousands of years ago, and it hasn't really changed since then. An easy way to remember this is to think of the four pillars. The first pillar is a thesis. An argument will posit a claim and then will back the claim with two, evidence. And in order to be persuasive, the author will then have to refute any counter arguments, arguments that might be raised against our own claim, and then we will end with concluding statements. What we should do now that the author has persuaded us that his point is true. When we see the word analysis, we should automatically think to ourselves, examination by criteria. What criteria we use, of course, will change by what it is that we're examining. If you are comparing two vehicles, you might want to know the safety record of both vehicles. That would be one criteria. You might want to know the miles per gallon of gas that each get. That's your second criteria. You might want to know the cost of the vehicles. There's your third criteria. So when we think about analyzing an argument or analyzing someone's rhetoric, the criteria that we use or that should automatically come to mind should be what we've just covered, the rhetorical situation and the structure of the four pillars of argument. In my mind, it is easiest to think about analysis as really a two-part multi-step phase. We think about the context of the rhetorical situation. Who is the writer? What is their expertise? What is the reason? What are they responding to? Why is that author arguing? What context does the argument appear in, and how does that add or subtract from credibility? What kind of publication? What kind of venue? What is the writer's knowledge about the subject? So context begins thinking about the writer, the publication, and then the audience. Who is the intended audience? And we can often determine this by what venue or publication the argument appears in. What do we need to know about the audience? This really gets into demographics. We might want to know age, education, socioeconomic status, geography, politics, race, ethnicity, religion. Many of these things will determine how we attempt to persuade an audience. Finally, the most intense portion of our analysis will generally be the logos, the text itself, the essay, the article. Look for the four pillars. Is there a clear thesis? Is the evidence credible and well-grounded? Does it support the thesis? Does the author actually take on arguments that would counter their argument? And is there a conclusion drawn that makes sense given the thesis and the evidence? That's the very basis of examining the text. Next week, we're going to talk about looking for actual fallacies, which you read in Analyzing Arguments. Where is it that we can see failures of logic within the text that is under examination? To practice these analytical skills, please use the analysis worksheet found in week 2 to analyze either Calvin Newborn or John Elkington and the Remaking of Beale Street in the reading for week 2. Be sure to upload your worksheet into the Dropbox by 11:59 p.m. Sunday, and be sure to email any questions or issues that might arise.